Welcome to Up and Comers of Hollywood. I'm your host, Marie Finch. This is a YouTube channel that provides inspirational interviews of professionals in the entertainment industry. Today's guest is Rod Roberts. He's a director and producer of multiple feature films, documentaries, and short films for theatrical release, television, and streaming service. He has worked with so many great talent, including the one and only Mariah Carey. He has worked on films around the world, in Hong Kong, Africa, London, and Paris, just to name a few. And now he's in Los Angeles. He's directing and producing more feature films. And we are so honored to have him here today. Rod, we are so excited to have you today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So, how are you doing?
Doing great actually. Actually happy that the rain has stopped finally, and California's gotten back to normal, and our normal weather is showing up. So doing good. No
Yes.
complaints.
Well, it's beautiful. And so the fact that you're here means a lot. Thank you so much.
Um,
It's beautiful outside.
no, absolutely. I appreciate being here.
Well, let's talk about you because
Right.
up and comers of Hollywood, you are an up and comer. And I saw one of your films, but we'll get to that about your one of your films that's on Amazon Prime. But let's talk about your journey. Where are you from?
I'm from Chicago. Um, uh, Grew up in the actual city. I always find it funny people say they're from Chicago and then they're from some suburb of Chicago and not the actual city. But I born and raised in Chicago, an area called Hyde Park. I was working for a shoe company that I won't mention, but I was working for them, and when I left, one of the designers from the shoe company had talked me into starting our own clothing business. And I thought, yeah, whatever. I'm not really interested in going back into marketing. I started off in marketing, it's what I went to school for. And um, I had no thoughts whatsoever of going back and being in a suit and tie and sitting behind a desk and all of that. And so I said, yeah. And probably about 6 months into us starting the business, he bailed on me and left me holding the debt and the business and everything else. And I just thought, well, okay, I could just take the loss and say I just threw away a couple of grand and walk away. But I was very egotistical back then and thought there's no way I'm just going to let this go and just give up. So I scaled the business down and I started a swimwear company. um, we originally started off, we were going to do jeans and hats and shirts and all this other stuff, and I thought none of that really makes easy money. And I thought, well, out of all the stuff that we had talked about doing, the easiest thing was swimwear. As women, you guys buy swimsuits in droves and bunches, and financially made sense, and it doesn't cost a lot to make bikinis. And so I became a swimsuit manufacturer. I actually learned to make swimsuits. I took classes on sewing and learned how to use a serger and knew what underwires are and boning and all these other aspects and marking and grading and patterns and so on. And actually did really well. And at some point, I was doing my own catalogs and lookbooks for the swimsuits and was hiring photographers that, for the most part, a lot of them just were interested in hooking up with a model. And I thought, well, you guys are just wasting my time. Not only, ruining my reputation as a business, but you're wasting my time and money. And so um, I did a shoot in Mexico at one point, and the guy just was full on, and I sent him home. The models were all appreciative, and literally they said, "All right, genius. Well, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go buy a camera." And so walked out in the Cabo San Lucas and went and found a camera and started shooting my own stuff, and got really good at it. And so when um, I got ready to sell the company and got rid of it, um, people would still call. I had friends who were models and other friends who had, businesses where they needed photos taken, and they would call and ask. And I, had nothing to do. I just sold the company and actually made some really good money in selling it. And I transitioned into a fashion photographer. I just done a photo shoot for a company out of Australia, and the owner of the company came to me and said, "Hey, look, we're starting a agency out in Sydney, and I'd love for you to come out and work with us as our in-house photographer." And I thought,
You learned on the job? You didn't take camera
no,
any classes at all with your camera?
no,
Just started.
I had a general idea about camera work. My dad always had some camcorder, some camera running around as a kid, and you know, it's not like I wasn't familiar with them. I remember my dad had some monstrosity of a VHS camcorder back in the day, and I used to take my little Star Wars action figures and sort of put them in scenarios on the camera and sort of do my own Star Wars movies as a kid, but I didn't really take any classes or anything like that. I just sort of was buying books and reading, about technique. I was looking at other photographers who were doing stuff and sort of mimicking what they were doing. Um, uh, and that was pretty much it.
It's not a coincidence that you were a child making little movies, right? So it's somewhere in there in that subconscious mind, and it just seems that you were natural, really, with the lighting, and because you're taking all these pictures in these beautiful places and using the sun, and
Yeah, I got a really great piece of advice from a photographer, a really great dude. And he just simply said, in terms of lighting, always keep in mind of where your sun is, even when you're indoors. And yeah, that was kind of the way I went when I first started. And then as I grew, I was, like I said, I was reading books and learning different techniques and, different lighting techniques and so on. And so I grew as I kept going.
you weren't directing or producing or anything at that point. But you did something. You went to Dubai.
Yes. Um, Left Sydney. I remember I was doing a shoot in Perth, Australia, and was shipping my things back to LA. My plan was to come here to LA, and I flew to Perth, Australia, did the job, and then I flew from there to Dubai. And I thought, well, from Dubai, I'll just go back to the States. I was in Dubai for probably about 2 weeks and got bored. The wedding was great. That's always fun in Dubai, and I bumped into a model in one of the grocery stores, and we got to talking and talked about doing a shoot, and so I did it. And her boyfriend, who's her husband now, at the time was uh, one of the royals' nephews, and he was uh, very nice to me and very kind about the photos that I had done, and so he had invited me to a dinner, and to thank me for the photos. And we got to talking, and he realized that I had worked for some different companies here in the States in marketing, and that I had started my own clothing business. And he asked me to work with Dubai Economics and help bring in some retail stores into the country. And I was like, yeah, all right, fine, sure, like whatever. And so, yeah, they paid me for that, and shipped all my stuff back from one shipping boat that was on its way to LA, and brought it all the way back to Dubai, which was nuts. But my 2 week holiday turned into a 4.5 year stay in Dubai. And how I got into film was one afternoon, same guy um, walked into my office one day and said, "Hey, we've got this film that's here. Um, you know, they've got things that they want, and I don't know what they want, but you're American, they're American, go talk to them." And I was like, well, that's stupid, but okay, fine. And so I thought it was some crappy B movie of whatever. And I walked into the meeting, and it was a film with George Clooney, Matt Damon, produced by Steven Soderbergh and directed by Stephen Gaghan. It was called Syriana, which is the one that Clooney won his Oscar for. And I thought, how the hell do you not know who George Clooney is? And he was just like, "Oh, I don't know. I could care less." And they needed extras and location scouts and people to help them with the film. And so I got together with their film company and some people from Warner Brothers. Started working with one of the first AD. I think his name was Simon Warnock. Started doing some stuff with them and another company called Filmworks, and that was it. I was off and running. I was working in on this film, and when it was over, I had this huge database of people who were potential extras for the next film, and I told the government, I said, "Listen, I've got at least 10,000 names sitting here. Why don't you guys just open yourselves an agency? And so the next time a film comes or you need a location scout or all this other stuff that happens, you won't be scrambling around." And they simply said, "No, we don't trade people. That's not what we do. We're not in the business of, that, but you can do it. And we'll take 51%." And so I started an agency there. I had a talent agency there for about 4 years, where we were doing films in the Middle East, Southern Europe, did one in Africa, was out in India doing TV and commercials in Bollywood, and that's how I got into the film business.
So you were networking with Warner's, with Hollywood,
Yeah,
while you were in Dubai,
yeah,
which was just a fluke that you even got invited to the wedding in the first place.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's an interesting journey.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I tell people all the time, being prepared to say yes to something is makes your choices a lot easier. And so for me, even the things that I didn't know, I didn't know what a location scout was, and I certainly didn't know about getting extras. And FilmWorks and myself and some other groups out there, we simply put ads out in the paper that simply said George Clooney movie. If you fit this demographic, show up at these times. Um, and so I did the same thing and put an ad out in every paper in the Middle East, and started getting people to show up. But I simply thought, well, how hard could it be? And it was a lot harder than I thought. But ignorance is bliss, and so I just simply was saying yes to the opportunity.
What was the reason why you left Dubai?
When I sold the agency, I sold it to a group that was based out of Hong Kong, and they bought the agency on the idea that they were going to be able to kind of do what I was doing and that whole thing. And so I left and took a job in Singapore as a photographer. Did that, and my original agent in Australia called me back. I went back to Australia for a minute, and then she sent me to a job in Argentina to work on a cruise line that went from Buenos Aires to Antarctica and the Galapagos and Peru and Chile. And so I went and did this shoot, and that was great. That was like a 2 week, 14-day cruise that was paid for, and I got to go to the South Pole and the Galapagos and all these beautiful locations. And so I thought, well, this is great. Before I go home, this is a really nice trip. And um, my little trip to Argentina, basically, it turned into another year I spent in South America. I ended up in Brazil, working for an agency there, and never made it to never made it to LA, and was working out of Rio, and still working as a fashion photographer. And somewhere in there, the people who had bought the agency in Dubai called and said, "Hey, we'd like to also open an agency here in Hong Kong, and if you're interested, we'd like to bring you out here." And I said, "Well, sure." again, I'm saying yes to the opportunity. Like, I've never been to China or Hong Kong or anything, so why not? And so I ended up leaving uh, Brazil and basically took the long way around to China. I went to Europe first, did a commercial in Paris, and did uh, a casting job for a short film, and so stayed in Paris for a couple of months, and then from there I went to Hong Kong, and then I was there for 2 years.
That's incredible. The fact that you're just open, right? You're just open and saying yes to all these opportunities. And
Yeah,
these were all opportunities. Some
yeah,
of them didn't seem that way at first, but they just kind of mutated.
yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So when did you start actually was producing first or directing first?
Directing was first, and that didn't come easy. I mean, when I first, so I left Hong Kong and I left for family reasons. My dad got sick and all this other stuff happened, and so I decided to come home. And when I got back, I originally was in Chicago for a short time. I realized being there as a photographer, filmmaker, or anything else that I wanted to do was a real waste of time. I mean, Chicago, basically, you've got about 4 months to really do anything, and otherwise, you're bunkered down. It's freezing cold and it's snowing, and there's not a lot to do. And so, when I left and came to LA, um, I knew having an agency in LA was pointless. There's a billion of them out here, and you're not getting around the CAAs of the world and Wilhelmina's and all these other massive companies. And so I wanted nothing to do with starting another agency. And so I really thought about it and said, well, maybe something behind the scenes on set would work. And had a really beautiful friend of mine, still one of my best friends here, who used to be in acting and had suggested that I go on to a film set as a stills photographer. And she said, well, there's a good way for you to get on set and kind of figure out what you want to do. And I got on set and was doing some Lifetime stuff and doing the photography, and realized that I didn't want to be a cameraman anymore as a director. The great thing about being a photographer is you get to be both. And you're kind of the director and the cinematographer at the same time. Whereas in film, you could be both, but why if you don't have to, And so um, I took the opportunity to start watching the directors and sort of shadowing them, even though I wasn't supposed to be. Um, as the stills photographer, it was great because I could always step into the set and kind of act like I was taking photos and being important, and really I was just watching what the director was doing. Um, so that's kind of where I started.
And what studio was that?
The company actually was called the Cartel, and they do a ton, and I mean a ton. They do probably like 12 or 13 Lifetime movies in a year. I mean, they spit those things out like, I mean, like a factory. It's what they do, and they're great at it, and they've been doing it for probably a decade or so. And they were just really gracious enough to allow me to sort of grow on set. So, even as a stills photographer, I kind of moved around, and they allowed me to work as a gaffer. I worked as uh, first AC and graphics and all these other departments where I really got to learn sort of what other people did and what it takes to um, to do those jobs and the respect that comes behind it. As a director, I'm truly blessed that I got a chance to experience all of that because but yeah, I got to a point where I figured I could do it on my own. And at some point, I got called for a job for a music video, and went and did that. and the video itself, it transferred into this whole sort of augmented reality, virtual reality sort of thing. And so I started directing these green screen shoots with musical artists and doing these virtual reality sort of videos. And that was really where I started directing and learning sort of how to maneuver myself on a sound stage and that sort of thing, um, which is how I ended up working on Mariah Carey's video. And but that was probably my first real directing of someone of some magnitude, some huge sort of star, and yeah, she was wonderful though, and she was so great. It was absolutely amazing. There was a moment where she literally was serenading the entire crew of "All I Want for Christmas."
I love Mariah Carey. I'm a big fan. So was do you think that was your big break in directing to start your resume?
Um, to a certain extent, and I won't. No, I don't necessarily know if it was my big break. I think for me, it was a big break for me, not for everyone else. It was a really great indication that the moment wasn't too big for me, or that I could be around the celebrity A-lister or this magnitude of an artist or this person and it not be too big for me. Uh, I've watched a lot of filmmakers sort of cower in front of talent and sort of shrink, and I felt like here's that moment or that test of whether or not I'm gonna join that club. And I found it just to be really easy, and I don't feel like I shrank in the moment, that I actually grew. And so when I finished that, I had the opportunity to make my own film. I'd done another job and made some money, and I thought, well, I could take this money and go buy a car or put some money down on a condo or whatever. I remember my dad at the time giving me crap. I was like, I could go, buy a camera for 100 grand. He was like, why would you do that? And I was like, well, because then it's mine and I can do what I want and make as many films as I want. And he goes, yeah, but you can rent them for like a fraction of the cost. I thought, fine, I'll do an actual movie and I'll figure it. And so I started writing Written on My Skin.
Now, I saw the movie. I saw on Amazon Prime and it was powerful. There's about an actress who is raped, basically,
Hmm.
and her journey through that. That's all I'll say.
Yeah,
It was so good. It was so powerful and was so well written. And it was a short.
yeah. Well, the funny thing is um, I originally wrote that as a feature, and the 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 two people that I was writing that about, you know, if you know the statistics of uh, women that are being assaulted, raped, it's 1 in 6. And so when I tell you I have 6 sisters, then the odds are, my motivation behind it was that it happened to one of my sisters, and it always sort of had an effect on me. And I always thought, if I had the opportunity to do something about it beyond just being really angry, to put it to use. And so I came across an actress I had met when I first moved out here. She was from Omaha, Nebraska. Beautiful girl, really nice, very sweet, really smart. And she told me her story, and basically she started acting from the time that she was 5. That's all she wanted to be. She's this 5-year old performing in Christmas and school plays, and went to high school, a drama school, and went to college for drama, and came out here wanting to be the next Meryl Streep. And um, maybe about a year into it, she ended up at a Hollywood Hills party where she met a Hollywood executive, and he's been outed since, but I won't say his name. And yeah, she was drugged, woke up with her belongings on, halfway, and was in an Uber car and had no idea how she even got in it. I first wrote it. I was trying to pitch it to studios where a lot of these people were outed, like Miramax and some of these other places I was, trying to get in front of, and you know, just as a newcomer in its own is hard enough to get in front of anybody. And so having that subject made it even worse. And I remember even filming it as a short, there were people going, well, okay, so you're making a movie about the casting couch. Like, well, everyone kind of knows this story. So, kind of like, so what? And I was like, well, yeah, it is kind of a story everyone's heard, and it's maybe not that big of a deal to some people, but it's a big enough deal to me. And I think it should be a big deal with some other people. A lot of people were telling me no, and just saying, we're not interested in film. And I'm not saying I did some masterpiece where I should be offended. I mean, it's a short and it was my very first film. So, I look back at it now and think of 1,000 other things I could have done to that movie to make it better. But it is what it is. And um, somewhere in August of 2017, Rose McGowan had outed Harvey Weinstein. And then all of a sudden, all of these people were like, this is such an amazing movie and so timely and great. And how did you know? And it's like, wait, what do you mean? How did I know? Everyone knows. Clearly, everyone knows. And I got a message from some people at Amazon that said, we'd love to have your short here on our platform. Would you submit it to us and do a deal with us? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd love to have it there. And so I pulled it from the festivals that didn't want me anyway, and put it on Amazon, and it's been doing well ever since.
It's an I just think it's a very intelligent movie in the fact at the end of the movie, you give facts about how many women are raped, um, what they go through when they do try to out the
Hmm.
person who did it, and the consequences that they have to go through. The victim, turning into the bad guy or
Yeah.
bad girl in some cases. It can go either way. We know that. That's very clear. But this, I just thought it was so, the facts and the intelligent way that you wrote this. And I don't want to give a lot away because anyone, I think everyone should watch this movie. Everyone. It just gives you a good sense of what women go through, and men too. Both, people have been through this. And it's a very touchy subject, but it's a subject now that's coming out through the Me Too movement.
Hmm.
It's a powerful movie, and it doesn't take long. He gets to the point. It's great. I was really impressed. So after Written on My Skin, what did you do next after that?
So after Written on My Skin, basically, I got a lot of attention from the short. Um, One of the groups came back to me, like I said in earlier, the group, the Cartel, were very gracious enough to let me direct a Lifetime film for them, which I did. Did really well. Um, played in uh, for a couple of weeks on TV, and that was all great, and it streamed as well. And from my understanding, it did well. And then from there, I decided, well, do I really want to do Lifetime and do Hallmark and those sort of things? And they're all very cookie cut, and they've got their place and people love them. I honestly, I did that movie, and it was amazing to see the amount of people that ended up on my Instagram. I remember when it first aired, I was watching my Instagram go from like 3,000 followers to like 11,000, and I thought that was nuts. Um, and it's just really weird. Um, but you know, people love those movies, and they religiously watch them from week to week. After I did that, I thought I still wanted to do some other things that mattered, and so I started working on a documentary with a producer friend of mine. And so we started doing a project about an actor who moved here and ended up homeless. Um, let's just say he didn't really plan uh, his time here in LA out correct. He came out here with literally no money, thought he was going to hit Hollywood and Highland and stand out there, and Steven Spielberg or somebody was going to turn the corner and go, "You, that's the guy I need. Let's go." And it didn't happen. And from day one, he had nowhere to go, nowhere to sleep, and ended up sleeping in an alley on the back end of Hollywood and Highland. I kid you not. We followed him around and interviewed him and talked to him, and he kind of told us how he survived and figured it out and got himself back on his feet. And it was a documentary I thought was important, and so that was my next project after the Lifetime movie.
Let's talk about now that we know your journey. I feel like I have a really good sense. I think our listeners have a really good sense of your journey, and it was wild. And one thing we learned from it is to say yes to a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely.
What are some of the biggest challenges in the filmmaking jobs that you've had that you can share with our listeners who are interested in the entertainment industry?
I would tell you the biggest challenges for me were probably just earning the respect, not just from your own crew, because if you're going in there and this is your first movie and they all know you're green, you could go in with a crew that literally gonna watch you sit and fail and take the check and go home. I was blessed enough to have people around me and friends that were around me that when there were things that I wasn't sure of, would come and nudge me and give me a bit of their own information or a bit of their own experience to help me move through. And so I was, blessed to have that happen. But um, respect from other filmmakers, from other producers, from other executives, and people who are in the business who look at their bottom line and say, well, why would I risk all of the what I've earned or what I'm doing on this guy as opposed to someone that I already know has done you know X, Y, and Z. And so that part's hard.
What do you think your biggest success is or was?
My answer is always the next film. It sounds very cliche and very hokey or whatever, but it's kind of true. Like I you know I have friends of mine that are like, "Oh man, you're doing this. That sounds great." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, it's a film that I'm looking forward to doing, that I'm excited about, and that matters to me. But once I'm done with it, I'm excited about the next thing, and that's kind of the way I look at the success of it all. You know, I tell my sisters all the time, I didn't get here just to get here, and so um, I'm never really satisfied with the idea that this is a success or this is the thing. I'm very happy for some of the films I've done. I'm very proud of Written on My Skin and some other things as well. But um, I feel like that's what I did at that time, and that's where I want to leave it. And my next film is the success that I'm looking for. And when I'm done with that, it'll be the next thing. And so yeah, I kind of celebrate, you know, the future film, the one I haven't done yet.
I like that.
Thank you.
Now we talk about tips for our listeners. Do you have any tips or any resources or any books that you've read that anyone who wants to get into directing or producing, maybe still photography, because that's an occupation here in the
Yeah,
industry. You talked about gaffer. A lot of people may not know what a gaffer means.
yeah. The guys that do all the lighting and rigging for our dollies and sliders and all the other equipment that we use on cameras.
On set.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know about my footsteps because that.
Everyone's footsteps
Yeah,
are unique. You're right,
yeah,
100%. We have to make that clear that it's your own journey. So we're just sharing other people's journey to give you ideas, to know what you're in for, basically. and what to expect. But everyone's experiences are different. Your experience is going to be different than Rod's. My experience is different than Rod's.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah, I don't imagine my experience being similar in that sense because it just went about it in such a strange way. But if I was to give any tip to anyone in terms of books, there's thousands of books out there, and I would say read as many of them as you can. I'm very good friends with a really well-known cinematographer, and he constantly is talking about something he learned on set that day, and just the idea that here's this person that's been in the business for 40 years and has done some of the most amazing film, still talking about something else that he learned. It reminds you that there's always something. There's never a moment when I don't learn something on set. I'm sure Christ, Spielberg would say the same thing. So um, that's the one, is always keep your mind open to the idea of learning something new, reading. Master classes are always a great way to go because you're hearing from the people that have done it and the mistakes that they've made, some things that you could avoid. YouTube is always a wealth of information on there as far as camera techniques or directing techniques, or if it's just learning how to build a shot list and those sort of things that come in play for directors. Um, I'm a sponge in that way. I want to soak up as much information as possible and pick and choose the things that I feel like will work best for me. Because what worked for, Steven Spielberg may not work for me, and vice versa. So I'm always trying to pick out the things that work for me on my set and make me comfortable or make me feel like whatever scene I'm in or whatever shot we're doing, that I can do it to my best ability, not to someone else's. Um, the only other tip I would say is just consistently be ready to say yes. Um, that has always been a thing for me, is putting myself in a situation where when I'm saying yes to something that I have the ability to actually do it. If some
I just feel that you worked hard as well. It's not just luck. I mean, well, some of it was pretty interesting curves. You did get opportunities. Other people, in a lifetime would love to have, and the fact that you said yes, but you also put in a lot of hard work.
yes,
And I think that's been a very common thread with all my guests is the hard work that they put into it 24/7.
yeah,
So, but I just thank you so much for coming out to Up and Comers of Hollywood. You are an up and comer. Everyone, take a look at his film. I'm going to have it below, his link below. I really love it. Written on My Skin on Amazon Prime. You have to watch it. It's really worth it. And I'll have his other links below so you can follow him on Instagram if you like. And we just thank you so much. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate
thank
it.
you,
Our
absolutely.
listeners, I'm sure, appreciated your nugget of wisdom that
uh,
you provided, and we really appreciate it.
no, definitely. I appreciate being here and you having me as well. It's an honor, honestly. I'm speechless. So
Keep going up with whatever you're doing, as long as it's positive. And remember, be kind. Be kind to yourself and to others. Thank you for tuning in.